Hello, and welcome to Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise Perspectives, a new series that's aimed at informing and supporting entrepreneurs and small business owners as they go through various situations. And of course, our first part of this series is going to be addressing the big situation we're in now, the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm Drew Harris, Professor of Management at Central Connecticut State University. I'm joined with Dr. Kostov Misra, the Associate Dean at Central Connecticut State University, and with Nick Castro, the CEO of Continuity, Inc. Mike is also an alum of CCSU, and he's been a professor for us in several capacities along the way. We're so grateful to have him here today. So, Mike, let's just jump in first with an overview of what Continuity is, your little bit of history and your role there.
Yeah, thanks, Drew, and good to be with you folks, and happy to share this kind of information. Continuity was started just after the last financial contagion or collapse back in 2008, 2009, with the concept that banks, credit unions, other federally or state chartered financial institutions would be facing a higher, more complex level of compliance management. And so its founder is a gentleman by the name of Andy Grenwalt. Andy is a serial entrepreneur here and certainly has helped us at the university on occasion, and has had a great track record of success in the Connecticut entrepreneur ecosphere, so to speak. And he launched Continuity with the concept of aiding these institutions who used to manage their compliance basically on notebooks and spreadsheets. And with the passage of the Dodd-Frank bill after the last collapse, that level of complexity just got far too in depth for spreadsheets and notebooks to handle it anymore. And his concept was to put an application in the cloud that would allow them to better manage this process, as well as provide them with regulatory advice.
So, Michael, again, thank you very much. When did you become aware of coronavirus, COVID-19, that might affect your business?
So we're, as an entity who works very closely with federally chartered financial institutions, many of whom do a lot of business overseas. We have some very big financial institutions. We were kind of starting to track this as early January, all right, where we were hearing kind of, murmurings of things that could affect assets and international funds. And so we started to kind of pay a little bit closer attention to it. By the time we got into February, it was looking like it might become very interesting. Some of that was not just from the federal institutions that we deal with or the state institutions we deal with, but we're also a venture-backed company. So we work very closely with the private equity industries, venture capital, private equity, private debt. And those who work in those industries, especially offshore, they were already starting to raise the flags, the red flags of a possibility of problem here with the pandemic. And so we had a heightened kind of visual on this and started to plan internally, not only for what we would have to do to support financial institutions, but how we would be running the business afterwards.
Wow. So you are starting preparing for this back in January.
Yeah, we moved to a pure virtual status of the company 2 weeks before the country and the state went on lockdown. We just could see it coming. And we have a predominantly virtual company anyway. So a very small number of people in New Haven, there's only about 10 there. And so moving to a virtual, footing was actually pretty simple.
Thank you.
So you're not delivering physical products, but we're wondering, are any of the things in your supply chain, there's a lot of information in your supply chain being changed, and what's happening with your company now? What's the current state of response?
Yeah, great question. So what we find ourselves, we really don't have a supply chain issue, right? From the standpoint other than, with everybody in this remote stance, has it had any impact on throughput over the net and in those environments, especially when you're selling a product in the cloud? the reality of it is it really has no effect. That was more of just adjusting to pure virtual type meetings and those type of adjustments. So our supply chain is not all that well impacted. What is impacted is our client base. And so, financial institutions are not used to not having their branches open, or they're not used to doing the kind of thing where they're openly engaged with the public. And they certainly are not used to the concept of working from home. And so to some extent, we help them bridge that gap. We even have one of our customers is from a bank in Pennsylvania, has provided us a great kind of feedback that we've now put out to other clients to explain how they were able to move their entire compliance and risk management group off site and go remote because of our platform in the cloud. And so they were continuing to do their job, even though they were doing it from home in a place where they normally would have to be on site to do it. And so I think we've been pretty excited about that, and we've made some very special kinds of approaches to the industry to help them get through this in the near term and the long term.
Mike, you were in my class the other day. Thank you for that as well. And you were talking about this new opportunities that came that are presenting themselves, and you're doing that through service. So maybe you could, I'm talking about, maybe share a little bit about that.
So we looked at this and we said, hey, how we offer two of the modules that we use in our technology platform provide curated data to these financial institutions. This is information that comes from the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, the NCUA, state associations that manage banking, and we have a team of experts who are all former federal examiners. And they curate this data, and we turn it into usable information right away. Now, in a normal course of business, when we're not in the middle of a pandemic, there might be one or two of those announcements a week on a busy week. In this case, we're seeing somewhere between half a dozen and a dozen a day. And it hasn't stopped since about March 1st. And so we went to the industry and said, look, the best way for us to get through this is for us to get through it all successfully and healthily. And we took our two modules that curate that information and we opened them free to the industry and said, look, whether you're a client of ours or you're not a client of ours, if you would like access to these modules, give us a call. We'll turn them on. You can use them. And when this is over, when this is passed, we'll shut, if you're not a paid customer, we'll shut it back down again. And you'll have the option to stay if you want. You can convert to a payable customer at that point in time. But it does none of us any good to hide this information in abeyance, and so we've done that. And overnight, we went from 300 clients to 450 clients, and the numbers keep incrementing upwards. People calling, can we have access? And so we see it as a challenge, but it's also an opportunity.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I'm interested in going along the same line. I'm interested to know about how do you managing your employees, and are you able to retain all of them? And what is happening there?
Yeah, another good question. So when this occurred, the first thing we looked at, and some of this is the feedback we've had from the equity markets and the debt markets, we had to look very closely at liquidity. We are somewhat in this interesting position. So my career, the majority of it has been in financial technology, bank technology. And in that space, we don't call ourselves recession proof, but we tend to be recession resistant. Our clients are insured federal entities, and they have to pay their bills, and they have to meet certain criteria in order to stay open. And so when you have a contract with them like as we do going forward, which is a multi-year recurring revenue scenario, we start a year with 91% of our revenue in our hands, right? We know where we're going and what's happening, right? And so we're able to look at our staffing and understand what happens if. And so we did. We went in and we did some serious modeling, my CFO and I, and we did look, what if everything stays at steady state? What if things fall off by 50%? And we even did a broken glass scenario, right? What happens if everything falls off the table and our usual recession resistant status doesn't hold, and we really have to go much further? And so we had the models built with the levers to make changes if we had to. And thus far we've been lucky and blessed, and we have not had to do that in any way, shape, or form.
So,
Yeah,
so does that mean that,
so I think do you have any new protocol for your employees in place, or how?
Oh yeah, great. Yeah, no, they're all working from home. And that's been in place since March 12th. And so we also, interestingly enough, not only do we work with federally regulated entities, but the FDIC, the Federal Reserve, they have the right, the OCC, they can examine us because we provide technology to these entities. And we do have to keep them apprised as if we have any employees who, we don't have to give HIPAA information, but we have to advise them as to whether we have anyone with the virus. And thus far, knock on wood, we haven't. So we've been lucky thus far.
Thank you.
so, you provide regulation and so forth. Have you guys in your modeling or thinking thought about, or have you done anything about applying for any of the PPP, PPE, the relief programs, so you don't need to do that?
Actually, we did. We looked at that and said, in the broken glass scenario, we could be facing, a number of layoffs. And, it's a roughly 30-person company, and we could have seen a third reduction if necessary. And that's hard to keep your customers satisfied and supported and moving forward. And so we did. We went into the PPP program. Our team, our financial team, was ready on April 3rd. As soon as the application green light lit, we filed. And I'm happy to say that we actually funded today. The coins are in the till today from the PPP.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we're looking, we will do everything. We have no intentions of doing anything but making it through the 2.5-month period and retaining all those employees, and so that we can get the forgiveness and turn this more into a grant than a loan.
So that's a program that's working. Sounds like it could really work for you.
It's shaping up to look that way, right? Between the combination of a good, strong mix of recurring revenues and this little kind of infusion of capital, to boost the capital situation short term, while orders may slow down a little bit. It's the combining to a very strong situation.
So just to recap a couple of things that I heard you say, that that the folks viewing this, you had some early detection that was really helpful, it sounded like. And you pretty quickly went about making some models, a sort of steady state, bad disaster kinds of models, so that you knew what to do. And then as and along with that, you moved very quickly to further make your workforce a remote workforce. You'd already were on that path, some new safety protocols, and then you and you were ready to go when this new grant program came. You didn't have to go look up numbers, and so it sounds like you did a lot of things that while you may not have had crisis management stuff before this, you reacted very quickly to put these things together. Is that fair summary?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Look, I mean, we're in the business of managing risk and compliance for banks, right? And for some of the more bigger name fintechs come to us for that as well. And And so, yeah, you gotta, nobody has a crystal ball, but you gotta pretend like you got a little bit of one. And so we took that. I think we have an experienced team. If you take my top five senior execs in the team and put us together, it's probably 200 years of experience in this
Wow.
area. So I mean, 40 years myself. My CFO's got 40 years. Our chief revenue officer is 40 years. And we're learning the lessons, right? This is not the first crisis we lived through. We lived through, you know, the S&L crisis in the late 80s, early 90s. We lived through the internet bubble in 99 and 2000. We lived through post 9/11. And we certainly lived through 2008. And so you start to I mean, in some way, shape, or form, the proverbial hair on the back of your neck starts to rise when you start to see these things, and you tend to react a little faster.
So I have another question for you. Since COVID-19 and that has affected many ways in our life, and it's definitely affected our family life as well.
Yeah.
And there is no necessary boundaries anymore between work and family. So how do you managing your work-life balance?
Yeah. So I've had a career of kind of having to always manage this, and I mean, not unlike any industry, right? It's if you're committed to your industry and you're committed to your career, those boundaries blur whether you're doing it on a webcam or you're doing it in the office. And I think you just learn balance over time. And I think that's, certainly when I spend time in the classroom at CCSU and work with my students, the thing I always try to remind them is you have to find balance. And there will be days when the business will own you, and then you have to find those days when you own the business and leave it to those who work with you and make sure that you can delegate to them, and step away. And if you can find that balance, whether we're in this mode or we're back in full blown integration mode, it the math is the same, and the outcome is the same.
Thank you. So this is towards the end of the session. We want to thank you, Michael Nicasto, the CEO of Continuity. And if you have any question for Michael, feel free to reach out to him. The email address is below, right, left-hand side of the slide. And if you have any question for me or my colleague, Dr. Harris, please feel free to reach out to us. Our email addresses are also on the right hand of the slide. So thank you very, very much and have a wonderful day. And we will come back again next week with someone else to help you out to get through this process. We are in together. Thank you very much from CCSU School of Business.